In a time when motor racing was conducted with integrity and passion, one unique character graced the stage of Formula One. His name was Ken Tyrrell, and his cars and drivers were to stamp their name indelibly onto motor racing's roll of honour. In his heyday with driver Jody Stewart, he attained the highest honours in a sport that frequently pushed the boundaries of human endeavour to the very limits. Ken Tyrrell was born in West Horsley, Surrey, at a time when motor racing was in its infancy, and there was very little evidence at that stage that he would one day be a great achiever.
I wanted to go to technical college, but I failed the entrance exam. So then I set my 11 plus and I failed that as well. And then I tried to get in the RAF as a boy entrant, but I failed the entrance exam to that as well. So not a very good start, you could say. But then I got lucky because the war broke out. And now the RAF would take anyone. I became a flight engineer, which meant that I flew in the latter part of the war. Then I got demobbed from the RAF and got my 25 quid for 5.5 years service and a new suit, and set out to make my own way in life.
Ken teamed up with his brother Bert, and together they steadily built up a small business as timber merchants. Away from the woodyard, though, his passion from boyhood had always been football.
I played football for the local village in Ockham, and they got up a coach party to go to Silverstone. We threw some beer in the back of the bus, and I saw my first motor race. As soon as I saw it, I fell in love with it.
He was full of it, and soon after that he got the idea to part buy a racing car, which I wasn't keen on at all, because we didn't have a great deal of cash. Don't forget, Ken was still in the timber business then. That was our business.
I suppose first she didn't like the idea of being away with 2 young children at home, but she probably could see that it was going to be difficult to talk me out of it.
His newfound passion was so strong that he quit the timber business and committed himself fully to motor racing.
I won 1 international race, that was in Sweden, in Karlskoga, and as a result of that, got a test drive for Aston Martins at Silverstone. And I did quite well in the test, actually, and John Wire was the team manager, and he had a chat with me afterwards and said he was looking for a number 6 to go in the 3-car team.
Here was a great opportunity, and Ken's racing career might have turned out quite differently had it not been for the emergence of a gifted driver by the name of Sterling Moss.
Sterling got to be number 1 and they no longer needed a number 6.
He got into motor racing not with the intention of being an owner and a manager, but with the intention of being a driver, which is a bit laughable when you think what a big chap he is.
Much to Norah's relief, Ken quit driving and tried his hand at team management. It was here that he realised his true vocation, and in 1960 formed the Tyrrell Racing Organisation. Based at the old timber yard in Ockham, Ken's fledgling team notched up some good results in Formula 3. It was around this time that Ken received a phone call that was to change his destiny forever.
I had this phone call from Goodwood, track manager Robin Mackay down there, and he called me up about this young Scotsman who'd been driving an out-of-date sports car around Goodwood and driving it with some verve.
That driver was none other than Jody Stewart, 24 years of age, unknown, and looking for an opportunity to prove himself.
I went down after an invitation from Ken to test a Formula 3 car, and there I met the great Ken Tyrrell. I was in awe because Bruce McLaren was there to drive a Formula 3 car to make sure that the pace of the test was comparable.
Jackie went off and did a few laps. After half a dozen laps, he was going quicker than Bruce. Whereupon Bruce said, "Let me get back in that motor car."
And he went back out and improved his time. And Ken said, "Well, it's time for you to run again." And again, I went faster.
Whereupon Bruce McLaren saying, "Look, this is ridiculous, let me get back in that car." And then he went quicker again.
So This went on all day, and I ended up having the quickest time.
One observer that day was motoring pioneer John Cooper, who'd seen many fast drivers in his time.
He took me to one side and said, "That boy's good. Get him signed up quick." So we did. Well, we then went on a series of races in Europe, one of them being probably the most important race for us, a supporting race for the Grand Prix at Monte Carlo. Of course, a lot of team managers watching, a lot of prospective Formula One team managers.
Anybody in those days who won the Monaco Formula 3 race really was on a rocket ship for the future.
Jackie's wife Helen was there with a home movie camera. What she captured that day was a small slice of motor racing history in the making.
He won the race so easily that it was, again, quite outstanding. Well, we then moved on to Formula 2, which was a bit more glamorous than Formula 3, and we were really racing against Knock and Rint, Graham Hill, and of course Jimmy Clark.
The combined talents of Ken and Jackie were flourishing, and by 1967, Tyrrell's ambition to team manage a Formula One outfit was looking more and more promising.
An awful lot happened in that period, you know. It was exciting. It was, especially for Ken, you know, he was progressing.
Tyrrell by now had become involved with the French company Matra, who supplied the cars driven by Stewart and his teammates. The combination was working well, and Matra had brought with them the backing of petroleum giants Elf, who provided a solid financial platform so crucial in Formula One. But it was a revolutionary engine developed by the Ford Motor Company that was to be the crucial factor in Tyrrell's entry into Formula One. With high performance and a friendly price tag, Ford introduced the Cosworth DFV.
Here was an engine that was infinitely superior to everything else in the field. Everything else, in comparison to this Ford DFV, was rubbish.
The point about it was, for the teams at the time, for the Tyrrells at the time, there was an accessible engine. It was much more important than anybody imagines, because they could just go and buy it, and you could go out and win races.
But can you imagine, in those days, you bought a Formula One Grand Prix engine for £7,500. I mean, the engine budget for a modern Grand Prix car today could be as much as £12 million.
One final problem remained for Ken, namely how to hang on to Stewart. Jackie was the subject of much discussion in Formula One circles, and lucrative offers from Enzo Ferrari were heading his way.
I was going to go to Ferrari, and Ken came to me and he said, "Look, why don't you drive for me in Formula One?" I said, "But Ken, you don't have a Formula One team." He said, "But what if we did have?" I said, "Ken, you couldn't afford what Ferrari are paying."
So I went to Walter Hayes, the Ford Motor Company, and I said, "Walter, would you guarantee Jackie's retainer £20,000? And much to my surprise, Walter didn't hesitate. He said, "You've got it."
Who would not back Ken Tyrrell? Even if he'd had to go and get another driver, you would have stayed with Tyrrell, because he was a straight, honest guy, and he delivered it. He could deliver quickly.
Having a chance to go to Ferrari or go to a brand new team that had never run before was a pretty big step. But that's how much confidence I had in Ken Tyrrell.
And incidentally, we just shook hands, which would hardly happen today with today's drivers' contracts. Probably last some 50 pages. Probably cost you £20,000 in lawyers' fees to get the document drawn up.
With everything now in place, Ken Tyrrell began his 30-year love affair with Formula One.
didn't have to wait long before the first win at Zandvoort, and being the first win, of course, it was a bit special. The race that comes to mind is the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring, and they had a tremendous amount of rain all weekend. And I had difficulty in getting Jackie to get in the car. He thought he thought the conditions were too bad to race. And I ended up, for the first and fortunately the last time in my career, having to make a driver get into a car. I didn't enjoy it.
The worst danger of all is rain. Slippery roads, fantastic fountains of water thrown up by the cars, water that's blinding and transforms the track into a series of black holes.
It was hugely wet and he won it by 4 minutes. And I don't think anybody's ever won a Grand Prix by 4 minutes. I didn't believe it, really. It was astounding.
In a year that would be remembered for the death of Jim Clark, the title was eventually won by Graham Hill and the Lotus team. But for the Matra Tyrrells to finish runners-up was still a great debut. After a winter of hard work, the team arrived at the first event of 1969, ready for business.
And it's a fantastic start to the season by Jackie Stewart in the Matra Tyrrell. After victory in South Africa, he wins the Spanish Grand Prix in fine style. Monaco, and after a promising start by Stewart, it's Hill in the Lotus who eventually gets the upper hand. He takes the checkered flag and his 5th win on this world-famous circuit. As the Formula One circus rolls through Europe, it's the Matra Tyrrells that lead the way. Jackie Stewart could well secure the driver's title at the Italian Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time.
Tyres to burn, records to smash in the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Jackie's partnership with Ken Tyrrell's Matra Fords has become the biggest thing since Lotus Fords and Jim Clark. After over 240 miles at an average of nearly 147 miles an hour, Jackie Stewart reaches the climax of his career.
I secured the World Championship at the Italian Grand Prix in Monza in one of the closest finishes that's ever been recorded in Formula One Grand Prix racing, when I won literally coming out of the last corner. And I sort of won by this much. And, you know, here was only our 2nd year in Grand Prix racing. Oh, yeah! The late 60s were halcyon years. Princess Grace was alive, and she brought herself to the Grand Prix every year with Prince Rainier. They had the Beatles and they had the Rolling Stones there, and fantastic people of the time. They were fantastic years to be remembered.
Oh, yeah!
But I can't say that the swinging 60s actually swung for me. Perhaps I was getting too old for that sort of thing.
The celebrations were soon over, and the new decade would see Ken Tyrrell facing his toughest ever challenge.
1970 was a very difficult year for Ken and for me, because at the end of 1969, as reigning world champions, Matra decided they wanted to go off and have a French engine, their own engine, and we wanted to stay with the Ford engine, both Ken and I.
We didn't want to leave Matra, but it became clear to us that if we wanted to continue to win races in 1970, we had to stay with the Ford DFE engine.
The team were able to start the season by using a chassis supplied by the newly formed March Company, but the package fell shy of the opposition. For Ken to get his team back in the game, some radical action was required.
During that time, Ken Tyrrell realized that unless he designed and built his own cars, he would always be indebted to somebody else and dependent on somebody else. And he wanted to get away from that.
The writing was on the wall, really. It became clear that if we wanted to stay in Formula One, we had to design our own car. So I contacted someone who I'd met at Matra, called Derek Gardner.
And he was never one to go in for preamble. Could I design a Formula One car? Interesting.
Well, he said he would be interested, so we met at a pub in Henley. We had a glass of Guinness together, and he agreed to become our chief designer.
I'd always been used to an engineering environment, and this was a converted hut in the middle of a wood yard in deepest Surrey.
The word is about. There's something to...
If you're in the market to sell a couple of acres of standing timber in Surrey, then Ken Tyrrell is your man. On the other hand, if you're looking for a suitable car to win the Formula One World Championship with, well, Ken Tyrrell can probably help you there as well. For here, in the slightly incongruous surroundings of a timber yard, Ken Tyrrell decided that the only way to get the racing car he really wanted was to build it himself.
And it turned out, at the end of 1970 season, here was a Tyrrell, unveiled without anybody having a shadow of knowledge that such a car was going to be in existence.
The car was completed too late to make a difference to the championship, but raced on 3 occasions. Various malfunctions forced the car to retire prematurely, but the potential was there. Testing was carried out over the winter, and every aspect of the car's performance honed and refined. And when the following season began in early '71, the all-new Tyrrell exploded onto the scene.
He had his new Tyrrell ready, which I think won 6 races. I mean, in the first year, new Tyrrell, it was a glorious flourish.
Ken and Jackie's passionate working relationship had matured by now into a world-beating partnership.
Just driving the front end forward all the time, therefore I'm inducing oversteer, which is wasting time and I'm sure putting temperature on.
Owner and team manager Ken Tyrrell, like Helen Stewart, has come a long way with Jackie. He's matured with him. They listen to each other. They respect each other.
Well, I tell you, there's puddles around the track. The place is a mess. I mean, what compound are we on? 14. They don't have anything else?
If you can't, you've got to rethink the whole deal. This is 1,200 revs higher. And maybe in the wet you can accept that.
Yeah.
I don't know. But this is what we've got to find out.
I should think I will. Be able to accept it.
We've had loads and loads of arguments and disagreements, but never one of intensity. And it's always been professional.
If you can't be straightforward with your drivers, then you're not going to have the sort of working relationship that the job requires, and you won't have a team.
A new addition to the partnership was a young French driver by the name of François Sévère. He was a charismatic man of many talents.
Je m'appelle François Sévère, je ne suis pas millionnaire, je suis pilote et je fais de la course automobile.
Well, Francois, of course, was a very handsome young man. The girls couldn't resist him.
The number of ladies, my goodness, the damage he did. It was terrible.
Well, Francois's parents wanted him to become a concert pianist, but Francois had other ideas. He wanted to become a racing driver.
Really give the power, it's not a nice impression, you know. See, all vibration. But it's not, with that one it's just very, very nice.
Francois and Jackie became very close friends. He never held back on anything that would help Francois. He told him everything. He became a pupil, really, and Francois just lapped it up.
You say first round the hairpin, first first on the left, the hairpin. And then, second? First for the left, the right one, under the...
Everybody's listening. Helmet.
It was a very short time before Francois became a very successful Formula One driver.
With such a strong combination behind the wheel, Tyrrell chalked up some famous wins. But the former timber merchant was never one to let success go to his head.
Roman Polanski did a movie at Monaco for the Grand Prix. There's a wonderful shot where everybody is ecstatic because I've just crossed the finishing line and got the checkered flag from the great Louis Chiron, and everybody else is celebrating, but Ken is standing there, and all he was doing was right, and his hands are going like this, right, let's clear this lot up and let's get out of here. Finished. The Grand Prix was over. Ken's never been a celebrator.
By the Austrian Grand Prix, Stewart had scored enough points to win his second championship. And with Sever's tally in the second car, Tyrrell took the constructors' title. They had pulled off a dream double, the ultimate achievement in Formula One.
You know, from nowhere, Tyrrell Racing was the #1 constructor.
They were really at the peak of their great glory at that time. I mean, one man never claimed to be a great engineer with a little hut in the woods.
And in that wooden shed over there was born the dark blue Tyrrell Ford that in its first full season of Grand Prix racing gave Jackie Stewart his second crown as world champion driver and captured for Tyrrell his first title as world champion constructor.
Being a small outfit, we're not involved with the politics that large companies manage to get themselves involved in, and our aim is to win motor races, and we're able to concentrate on doing that. Well, to our surprise, we won the Constructors and the Drivers' Championship in our first full season in Formula One. It would be extremely difficult to do that these days.
Tyrrell's small-scale, close-knit setup was the perfect recipe for success.
We were a small group of very intense individuals, if you like, who relaxed handsomely together.
Well, we sometimes have a game of table tennis as well, and if we can find Francois to have a game. Do you fancy a game?
Yes. Got my bat.
A good one. A good one. Okay.
We were very close, Jackie and Francois, and it was all like a family, you know. We saw a lot of each other away from the racing.
A tight-knit, movable society, whiling away an easy afternoon.
Norah was fantastic. Helen did all the timekeeping with Norah for the team. And simple stopwatches take the entire field and do a lap chart at the same time. Those girls worked really hard in those days.
They all seemed to bring the best out of each other. I mean, people say that Jackie Stewart inspired Tyrrell and Tyrrell inspired Stewart, but the answer is that they got the best out of each other.
Jackie's work with Sever had also paid dividends. At the last race of the year at Watkins Glen, USA, the fast-improving Frenchman drove a storming race to win his first Grand Prix and capped an unforgettable season for the Tyrrell team. But these heady days were to be short-lived. A turbulent year was about to unfold, and traumatic events were soon to follow.
This is the tentative schedule for the 1972 Grand Prix Tour. An average per driver of 100,000 miles a year. And don't forget all the days of testing, aerodynamic improvements, sponsor confabs, and publicity planning.
I mean, in those days, I did more appearances than a modern Grand Prix driver would ever do in 5 years. I was doing in 1 year. I mean, it was a colossal workload.
compete, just to push yourself and your car hard enough so that either you or it breaks under the strain.
I was simply getting more aggravation than I was getting satisfaction. I was burned out. I then had a duodenal ulcer that hemorrhaged.
He got an ulcer from doing too much racing, probably because he was racing in the States as well as doing Formula One, and that was really too much, and no driver would think of doing that today.
Health worries aside, Jackie was also becoming concerned about the risks drivers were facing each time they competed. There was a fine line between winning and paying the ultimate price.
Because in my world, there was death.
Safety was a sick joke. There wasn't any safety. The drivers were driving round in what were essentially mobile petrol tanks, and it was by no means unusual for 4 or 5 people to be killed in a season.
And we lost friends just month after month after month.
It was really awful. We were going to too many funerals. Fortunately, Formula One has come a long way since then.
But when 73 came along, I was still being affected by all of this. And Ken must have sensed something about it.
Jackie came to me and said that this was going to be his last year. He was going to quit at the end of 73.
Followed a bonanza, an extravaganza.
Ken's future was now full of uncertainty. Finding a replacement driver of Jackie's caliber would be a tall order. Knowing it would be their last season together, Tyrrell and Stewart focused on the business they knew best, winning Grand Prix. With victories in South Africa, Holland and Britain, Jackie opened up a healthy lead of points. And at his last appearance in Monaco, he equaled Jim Clark's record tally of 25 Grand Prix wins. And by the time they arrived at the Nürburgring for the German Grand Prix, the famous Blue Tyrrells were in a class of their own. Stewart took the checkered flag and edged closer to his 3rd Drivers' Championship in 5 years. It was to be his 27th and final win in a magnificent career that had blossomed with Tyrrell.
I couldn't possibly have expected to have that kind of success without Ken. I mean, he was the reason for my success. And to retire as world champion was a great bonus, but I would have retired anyway. Ken knew it, and he was by then looking for other drivers.
The man who caught his attention was the hard-charging South African, Jody Scheckter.
Ken was the team in Formula One, had won the World Championship more times than anybody over that period of time. When he offered me a drive, there wasn't really much decision to be made. It was the team to join.
The final event of the year arrived at Watkins Glen, and practice got underway. Jackie was preparing for his last ever race, and Francois was keen to prove that he would be a worthy successor.
When he went out for his last run in practice, he said, "I'm going to put this car on pole." And that was the sort of determination that this young man had.
Past me coming out the pits down into that corner.
And it was like everything else. Just when you're really up and up, then fate strikes. and we lost Francois.
And as I came around that corner, I saw the nose of the Tyrrell. And I saw the car, which was caught in the guardrail and bent over, and I jumped out and tried to do something.
The aftermath of it was really awful. I came close to giving up motor racing in a few weeks after the accident.
Because Francois was going to come along and take Jackie's place, and I think Jackie had sort of nurtured Francois along these lines. And it was a dreadful shock. I'll never forget that.
Motor racing was never quite the same for me afterwards.
I mean, it shockingly affected the whole team. I mean, all of us were devastated by it. He was such a talent, such charm, and just one of the nicest men you'd ever hoped to meet in the world.
Today in school. At lunchtime last Sunday, Stewart announced his retirement from motor racing. Jackie said he decided to quit the racing game to save his wife and 2 young sons the terrible anxiety that surrounds every Grand Prix nowadays.
People are going to say to me, how are you going to replace Jackie Stewart? It is impossible to replace somebody with this enormous amount of talent. I don't think in terms of replacing Jackie. I think in terms of looking for another Grand Prix driver.
He had to pick up the baggage, if you like, and go back to work and secure a driver. Not only one now, but 2 drivers.
With Scheckter signed up, Ken opted for a driver who'd shown some promise over the previous 2 seasons, Patrick Depailler.
Patrick was a boy racer. I mean, he just loved driving racing cars. The idea that somebody was going to pay him to drive a Formula 1 car was like every day was Christmas Day.
The 2 newcomers gave their best during their first season with Ken. Scheckter at one point led the Drivers' Championship and eventually finished a creditable 3rd.
Ken taught you to put your head down, be tough, and do everything to win races. That was his style, and he was very good at it. And that's what you needed. Yeah, I mean, whatever he said, you know, you just listened to it, and I didn't always agree. But he was trying to get me to win championships, and I think he pushed me in the right direction to do that.
Both drivers had undeniable talent, but lacked the experience and know-how of their illustrious predecessors.
I was the young boy and must listen to Ken. They didn't want to develop, or they subconsciously didn't think of developing the car. They thought, we need to teach these new guys how to drive.
Take that one in second, go into 3rd, and then as you go right along, take it as high as you can in 3rd, and then go on a light throttle.
There was a big jump expecting Patrick and Jody to take over where Jackie and Francois had left off.
With hindsight, he realised he did the wrong thing, because what he should have done was to go out and spend money to get a top driver.
By the end of 2 seasons with their new recruits, Tyrrell had slipped back down to the middle of the pack. Recapturing their former position would require drastic action. What came next would send shockwaves reverberating throughout the motor racing world.
We really had to do something better. So again, it was back to the clean sheet of paper. What could one do? I formulated this design of a car with 6 wheels, 4 at the front, 2 at the rear.
The idea behind the car was that with the narrow front, it would have better penetration. The 4 small wheels put the same amount of rubber on the road as the normal 2 larger ones.
Codenamed the P34, construction of the 6-wheeler went ahead in top secret.
The car was kept a secret until we launched it at a press conference at a London Heathrow hotel where it caused quite a stir. The car was unveiled very slowly from the rear until finally the whole car was exposed.
Silence. And to silence the various critics and journalists and all the other experts, it really takes some doing.
When I saw that car, I thought, this is a brave concept. And in Grand Prix racing, you're always trying things to look for an advantage, because everything is so competitive. It was an impressive piece of thinking, and an even more impressive piece of development.
The car was quite successful in its first year. There were a number of second places, and I think at one stage during the season we led the championship.
The Swedish Grand Prix saw both the six-wheel Tyrrells totally destroy the opposition. It caused a sensation in the paddock, and the P34 looked set for a bright future.
It was quite exciting because you thought, boy, this is going to be breakthrough. We're going to be, you know, dominant. But the more I sort of worked with it, the more it didn't make sense to me.
198 miles, 76 times down this straight past the pits.
It was really a controllable, fun car. You could do anything with it. But that didn't mean to say we were dominant or could beat the other cars.
The South African won the Swedish Grand Prix in the Tyrrell six-wheeler, but the pace at Brands Hatch has been too much.
It was a car that should theoretically have been much better. Except that the secret of motor racing is that the simpler and more boring you are, the better you're going to be.
Scheckter became ever more disillusioned with the car and eventually left the team. In 1979, he would become world champion with Ferrari. Depailler liked the six-wheeler, but there was growing feeling in the Tyrrell camp that the concept be abandoned.
I think what destroyed the concept in the end was that the development costs for yet better tyres were just not bearable by Goodyear. But it was a great example of Ken's willingness to do something daring in order to try to do something better.
The P34's heyday was over. It was back to the drawing board, only this time without designer Derek Gardner.
Well, certain things happened. I really don't want to discuss them. Ken wasn't the easiest of people to discuss anything. He would try to break you down. I mean, he could be quite formidable.
Once again, it was all change at Team Tyrrell. By 1978, it was back to four wheels, with Didier Pironi joining Patrick Depailler. Depailler had gone 4 seasons without a win, but he finally ended his drought and reigned supreme at Monaco. Both drivers were to move on from Tyrrell, but sadly, their love affair with speed was to cost them their lives. The 80s were a time of great innovation. The cost of Formula One's high-tech machinery grew ever larger, and the sport found it hard to keep up with developments.
When the 80s came along and Grand Prix started to change, what would you do? What would you design or build if you wanted to plan for the future?
One new feature was the turbocharged engine, which Tyrrell immediately resisted.
The development of the turbo was a very expensive era, with engines blowing up all around us, engines catching fire, and for me it didn't add anything to Grand Prix racing.
Despite the disparity, it was a Tyrrell that won the American Grand Prix in 1983 with Michele Alboreto at the wheel. It was to be Tyrrell's last ever win. Always on the lookout for fresh talent, Ken recruited another young hopeful by the name of Martin Brundle.
Ken gave me an opportunity that nobody else gave me. Gave me a 3-year deal. And Ken was incredibly loyal to his staff, and he had a great following.
Brundle started well, but his dreams were shattered when he broke his ankles in a crash. Worse news followed. Scrutineers had discovered irregularities on the Tyrrell car, and Ken faced a court of inquiry.
I wasn't directly involved then. That was during a short period when I wasn't really in Formula One, but knowing all the people involved, I think what happened there was that a compromise was proposed to Ken, but the compromise would have involved him admitting that something had happened which should not have happened, and he was not prepared to do that, so he pushed it to the limit, and really, I think, came off worse as a result.
We were banned for, in the FIA's opinion, of carrying ballast in the car that wasn't properly secured, in spite of the fact that the lead shot that we carried as ballast was secured in a rubber fuel cell and was properly secured.
The team lost all their points from the season. Reports at the time speculated that Tyrrell's disqualification was more to do with his lone stance against Turbo.
Well, my vote only counted if we were in the championship. By banning us, we were out of the championship. Draw your own conclusion.
Tyrrell entered a period where the kind of success he was used to grew more and more elusive, and the search for financial backing began to take up increasing amounts of his time.
As the technology got more and more sophisticated and expensive, the teams had to generate more money. And there was only one place they could get it from, and that was sponsors.
The haves and have-nots became ever further apart, and Ken was one of the have-nots.
When you're on the ropes and finding it hard to be competitive, hard to get people, your backers, to believe in you, it's a difficult experience, and Ken fought that.
The competition was not just on the track. The competition had moved to the boardroom, and the competition was with sponsors and who could get sponsors. And Formula One had become supersonic. It was the space race.
Formula One had changed beyond recognition. It was now a huge business where marketing gurus outnumbered the mechanics.
Ken's time had passed, and he was sensible enough and realistic enough to accept that and to do the right thing, which was to leave with dignity.
Tyrrell sold his business to British American Racing. What was left at the factory is finally being packed away.
102 garage banners, yep. 44 wheels.
Paul Stoddart of European Aviation has bought what remains of the Tyrrell collection and will race the cars in ex-Formula One events, keeping the Tyrrell name alive.
And for the last 30 years, this place has been a hive of activity. So it's a bit sad to see it so quiet and deserted.
I didn't know that it was going to be so empty. I had no idea. Not nice.
Next to the factory, the famous old woodshed still remains, where their life in motor racing began so many years ago.
Come on, let's go home.
I've driven for some pretty remarkable people. The most remarkable is undoubtedly Ken Tyrrell.
Ken was He was a fixture, a character, somebody who, you know, has been there since whenever. But once you've done it, that's it really. There's nothing more to do.
Ken is a dinosaur, and I say that in the nicest possible way, because we will never see the like of Ken Tyrrell again.
This sport would be a better sport by 1,000,000 miles if there were more Ken Tyrrells in it.